All right, so how do I actually hold a fucking gun? I'll tell you. All right, so what I try to do is I try to use the least amount of strength as possible, right? Because I know if I'm using muscular strength to hold a gun, that as I get farther back and I get longer duration strings, I'll be more likely to change that muscular strength, right? If I ask you to just hold something really fucking tight, at some point you're gonna start to have a variation in pressure change. And it might be like it loosens up a little bit, but then it tenses back down, right? Well, if I'm shooting throughout that process the whole time, that makes the gun behave differently, right? If that gun behaves differently and I'm trying to shoot in a predictable manner, does that facilitate me to be able to do that? No, because the gun's behaving. I can't predict something if I don't have the same dot tracking pattern, right? It's not predictable anymore. The gun's not returning or behaving the same. So I need to hold a gun that's going to set me up for success. And I still fuck this up. We're all humans, right? But the goal is to try to make it as simple as possible, right? So with the amount of pressure that I put in my firing hand, the way I conceptualize this is I hold it like a can of Coke, right? Can of Pepsi, whatever, like you crack it open. If I squeeze it too tight, it'll crush the can, it'll overflow, right? But I also want to drink it because I'm thirsty, so I don't want to spill it. I don't want it to fall out of my hand, so I need to hold it just enough to keep the can in my hand, but not overflow it and fucking break the can. That's how much pressure I conceptualize in my head that I'm holding with this hand. This also allows me to keep really good dexterity in my trigger finger so I can run it really fast, right? Because the more tense that this hand gets, the harder it is to move this finger really fast. Now, there are some dudes out there that can go 100 and 100 and disconnect this fucking finger and run it fast. I ain't one of those dudes, right? So if you are one of those fucking dudes, hell, bro, do it. I don't fucking care. But for me, I can't do that. And I'm not one of those dudes where you see them on the internet, they're like, disconnect and do, like, I move all the fingers, bro, right? So I just try to keep it relaxed. With this hand, I try to use leverage to lock the gun in. All right, I don't want to use muscular strength. So a lot of people hold or put their hands in the same fashion, but they're not actually applying what I'm doing here. So what I do is I take these fingers and I lock them into my hand. I dig them into my hand. They happen to fall into the grooves, but it doesn't really matter if they don't fall in the grooves. They could fall in the knuckles, they could be behind it. Depending on your hand size, it might fall in different spots. That's why I always put the chalk on the back. It makes it fucking, that's where I want it. It really don't matter on the inside. It matters right here so the fingers don't slip, right? I want them locked in here. So what I do when I lock these fingers in here, I make a clamshell, right? And since these fingers are locked, when I roll the grip back, it naturally makes the gun extremely tight because these fingers are locked. Does that make sense? It's like a fulcrum right there. And now the gun is super tight in my hand and it requires no muscular strength to lock this gun in. What I also try to do is I don't try to put connection on the side here, all right? Putting connection on the side, if you have pressure changes, really deviates the gun left and right. So what I try to do is I try to bite into the rear here with my palm, right here. All right, that's why this is all calloused up. I bite like that into the back of the gun. So I have good positive front and back locking. There's really no pressure on the side of the gun, right? And that gives me enough to keep a really good, durable, consistent grip to make it behave cleanly, right? And then I'll be least likely to change that. Does that make sense? All right, so obviously high in the backstrap. I know we just did that dumb demo, but we want to be high in the backstrap to mitigate as much muzzle rise. I'm not trying to keep it flat. I'm just trying to not give it any additional room that isn't required to flip, right? But I'm not trying to like drive this gun down. I'm just being high on it, keeping it leveraged, good bone structure, right? If this wrist is not locked, the gun's gonna flip. So I need to keep this wrist locked, but not pushing into the gun, right? So I see a lot of you guys, they're like flexing your wrist while you're shooting, right? That's changing the structure, that's changing the behavior of the gun. This needs to stay, whatever position this is in, it just needs to stay. And I'm not like tensed on it, I'm just not letting it change. It's just locked in that position. Now, depending on the gun and the grip angle you're shooting, that might look different, right? It might not be as neutral. That's why I like PDPs. They have a neutral grip angle, right? It allows your hands to be very relaxed and very neutral, and it's pretty easy to lock the gun, right? Same thing with this hand. I'm not trying to camp my hand or anything like that, right? That's hyperextending that. I feel like that makes it harder for me to hold. Yes, it puts a little more leverage on it if you want to use strength. But what that does is it splits the back of the gun, right? What I find, and one of the physical cues that I do when I draw a gun that lets me know I have my grip, is that when I draw this gun, when I come into here and I feel that pressure in the back of my hands right here, and that feels tight, that lets me know this gun is ready to rock, right? If I don't get it, I'm still gonna have to shoot, right? But I'm just gonna be a little bit more conscious, and I'm gonna take a little bit more bandwidth and put it onto my grip of being like, don't change that, idiot. Like, this is not good. We need to just take a little bit of bandwidth from vision and put a little bit more back on the grip. Where ideally I'd like to just be like subconscious, all bandwidth on that. But when I get that bad grip, I gotta take a little bandwidth and put it back on the grip to make sure that I'm not changing it, to salvage whatever the fuck is going on. Does that make sense? All right, so we're gonna go back to doing those doubles again real quick. All right, we'll do another rep at 5, and then we're gonna start moving it back.